I went to this village for the first time. I think it was probably the third or fourth time that the local pastor had been there who found the village.
Okay.
And when we showed up, he said, "Stay in the car. If I can't find this one guy, we're going to have to leave."
So how safe is this place?
Well, place where we're at is, if you go to the State Department's website, it's going to tell you not to go there.
Right.
And so it's...
This is the Men Refined podcast.
Hey friends, welcome to the Men Refined podcast. I'm your host, Rafael Sifontes, and I have a good friend of mine, Tony Gooch. Tony, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tony, it's a pleasure. And I want to bring Tony into the mix because he has an amazing story that I would like others to listen. Tony, how about you start with just introducing yourself just a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your family, your wife, and then we'll go into this story, which I am sure that you guys are going to be super encouraged about his side.
Well, my name is Tony Gooch, and I've been married to my wife for 42 years. We have 2 children and 7 grandchildren. And I've been working basically in the space business since 1989. In 2015, I relocated from Florida to Colorado Springs. And about 2 years ago, I moved up here to Firestone.
That's Firestone, Colorado, for those of you who are not here, local. The ministry that you're part of, if you can just share a little bit of your story. You're part of this ministry that travels to Africa and helps build water wells and also preach the gospel to these tribes in Africa. How does Tony Gooch get connected to this ministry? I believe that God is going to use each one of us differently. And the way that he will use you, it will be totally different than the way he will use anybody else. But I think you are in a very unique place right now in your season, in the season that you're in. All your kids are grown, right? They're married, they have kids, so you're kind of like cruising, right? Mm-hmm. Can you call that cruising?
Sure.
Yes, you're cruising.
Well, you have to go back to around 1988 when I was in the Air Force and was wanting to get out of the Air Force, and had an opportunity present itself for me to get out early. And actually thought I had 2 weeks left in the Air Force. I had been praying about that, and the Lord closed that door. And I'll just say, through a series of events over the next 3 to 4 months, the Lord made it very apparent to me that he wanted me to put my yes on the altar, and then he would show me what he wanted me to do with my life. And I was in a crisis because there were a couple of things I wasn't willing to do for the Lord. One of those was to be a missionary. And so I basically arm wrestled with the Lord for several months, and I was a miserable person. But I finally surrendered to the Lord my life. And the day that I did that, I got up from the altar with a huge burden lifted off of me, but also a fear that the Lord was going to call me into missions, and that's not something that I had a desire to do at that time. And so that's really where it started for me. A few months later, I did end up getting out of the Air Force, and I moved to Florida and began to work at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in the space program. But I knew in my heart that I believed that the Lord had something more for me, and that it was going to involve missions. And it was still not something that I wanted to do, but what had changed is that I now had a willingness to do that.
How did that happen? That willingness to accept whatever God will throw at you and whatever his decision was.
Well, it goes back to when I was arm wrestling with the Lord, and I knew I had been a Christian for a long time. I was raised in a Christian home. I accepted the Lord as my Savior when I was 7 years old. And so I grew up knowing the Lord, and I grew up knowing that I wanted to be and I needed to be in the center of his will. And so when I began to realize that there may be things that he wanted me to do that I didn't have a desire to do. I began to resist that. But, the Lord has a funny way of getting us to where he wants us. And
that is true.
So he brought me to the point where he broke me, and I surrendered, and I said yes. I said yes to whatever he had for me, not knowing what that was. And so that's what changed. The willingness to do what he called me to do became very real in my life that day. Even though I might have not had the desire to do it, I was willing to do it because I knew that his will was best.
And I think that's part of the love that we as believers, of people in the faith, that's a result of your love, which is the obedience that comes after that. Because if we bring that back into our families, you have your kids, and your kids are going to obey you because they love you. Obedience comes after the love that you may have for a certain person. So through that love, obedience will show very distinctive in a different way. So you're being obedient even though you're not 100% sold out to the idea of doing a certain thing, but through the love that you have, then you're being obedient and you're obeying God's will. Then what happened?
So I ended up getting out of the Air Force, and I got this great job at the Space Center. It was like a dream job for me. But I still had in the back of my mind, this can't be it. I wrestled with the Lord for a long time over putting my yes on the altar, and now I had this great dream job. Everything was going well, but I was still expecting God to do something. And so one Sunday, I went to church, and we had a special speaker there that morning from India.
That was back in Florida?
That was in Florida, yes, in 1989. And so this guy got up and started speaking, and about halfway through his sermon, it's like the Lord told me, I want you to go to India. And I didn't really know anything other than he told me that's what he wanted me to do. And I basically wept through the rest of that service. There was no resistance in me. I had been waiting on the Lord to tell me, and he told me that day. And after the service concluded, the pastor got up and said that this gentleman ran a big mission organization in India, and he would come to the U.S. once a year to recruit teams to come and preach the gospel in India, and that he had agreed to take a team over there, and he needed 7 men to go with him. And so
were you one of those 7 men?
I knew immediately that I was one of those 7. And so I got a meeting with the pastor the next week, and I kind of told him my story, and said, there's no doubt in my mind that I'm one of the 7, and what are we going to be doing anyway?
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, well, 3 of us are going to be preaching the gospel at crusades, and then 3 or 4 are going to be taking care of logistics, taking pictures, things like that. And I looked at him and I said, I guess I'll be taking pictures because I'm no preacher. And he looked at me and he said, well, we'll see. And so I was numb, after that Sunday. And for 2 weeks, I was just like, could not believe this was happening. And really didn't, still didn't have a desire to do it, but I said yes a year before that to the Lord, and this was it. And but about 2 weeks after that happened, that I met with the pastor, I woke up one morning, and everything had changed. I woke up with a burning desire
to go to India,
to preach the gospel in India. And so that was the event where my desires changed. The Lord took what was a willingness and he turned it into a desire.
Amen.
To do his work.
Amen.
And that changed my life. But I will tell you, that trip to India never happened. That's a whole nother story, but it became a very devastating event in my life. But the thing that did come out of that whole situation in my life was a change in my desire to get involved in mission work. And so that's where it began for me.
Which is interesting the way you put it and the way you tell the story. Because even though God has changed your heart, and through that, your desire now on the way you're going to tackle, one, the situation, and two, actually, the trip and the place that you're going to, for him to shut down everything, you may not need to go into details about what happened, why that trip was shut down. But, I mean, how do you come to grips? Because your heart has changed already at this point. I can only assume that you're just sold out right now, excited and afraid at the same time because you're doing God's will. Tell us a little bit about that heartbreak, to call it like that, because that must have been challenging for you.
Yeah, it was very challenging. In fact, it took me 2 or 3 years to get over that. And I felt like God's purpose in my life had been compromised, and there was nothing I could do about it. And it's just something that happened, was out of my control. And so it took me several years to get over it. But eventually I got past it, and I started looking for my next opportunity, to serve the Lord in that manner. And the next opportunity that I had was to go down to South Florida and put a roof on a church that had gotten damaged by a hurricane that came through.
Yep.
And so when that opportunity presented itself, I told the Lord, I said, Lord, this is not what I want to do, but it's the only opportunity you've given me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I went down and I did that with our church, and I felt like I was obedient to the Lord. And so, but I did eventually get over that, and I just began to, wait on the Lord, basically. That's what I was doing.
How do you process this as a man, right? With your family, with your wife? What's that journey looks like?
There's always going to be disappointments in life, and I've had my fair share of disappointments, but what they have taught me is that regardless of your circumstance, you can trust the Lord with what's going on. He is in control of your life if you give it to him, and you can trust him with it. And it may not look like what you want. It may not look like what you expect. But I can look back, on my life and thank God for all the disappointments because they have moved me from where I was at the time to where he wanted me to be and what he had for me. So that's kind of how I processed it.
Amen. So you're in Colorado now.
Yes.
You were able to travel to Africa. Tell us a little bit about that story.
All right. Well, if you fast forward through a number of years, we ended up at a church in Florida. It was the second church that we had attended there. We'd been living in Titusville, Florida for about 15 years. And we started attending a new church. And I would say prior to that, I had gotten involved in the Lord had given me an opportunity to go to a 1-year Minister of Missions training program up in Atlanta, Georgia. Mm-hmm. And I got exposed and I got some training on how to be a Minister of Missions in a church. And we ended up at this new church several years after that, really in a really broken way because of some things that had happened. And I was really, again, I'd found myself in a very dark place with the Lord, was angry at the Lord about some things that had happened, and really was just, trying to survive. But fast forward about 3 or 4 years at that church, and they asked me to become the director of missions at this church. And by then I had healed up from some things that had happened, and I was ready and willing to serve the Lord. And he basically gave me my dream opportunity to serve at this church as the director of missions. I was still working in the space program full time, so this was kind of a side gig for me, but it was basically a second full-time job. Mm-hmm. And so when I became the director of missions, one of the programs that the church had was we had a retreat center at the church, and so once a year, a lot of pastors from Kenya that were in the U.S. going to seminary would come to our church for a retreat. And as a result of that, our pastor kind of got a heart for Kenya and had started a program partnering with a university in Orlando, Florida Christian University, to offer degrees to pastors in Kenya so that they didn't have to come to the U.S. because what was happening is it was very hard on the Kenyans to come here, very hard on their families, very expensive. Yeah. And what we were seeing was once they got here, they never wanted to go back to Kenya. Oh. And so my pastor, along with another gentleman from Kenya, started this program 2 or 3 years before I showed up. And they were doing that. And he was a senior pastor of a large church, and he was trying to manage this program that he started. And in fact, he was really thinking about shutting it down. And so he asked me to go to Kenya with him in 2007 to assess that program with the potential of just shutting it down. And so I went to Kenya with him, and I stayed a couple of days longer than him because he had some other things he needed to do. And long story short, I just really felt like the program was worthy. I had met about 40 pastors that were in the program, and they just captured my heart. And one in particular, I preached at his church while I was there, and that was the first time I'd met him. And all he wanted to talk about, this guy was kind of overseeing 5 churches, but he wanted to go be a missionary to a tribe called the Dorobo. They're one of the lowest tribes in Kenya. And during my morning with him that Sunday morning, I felt like the Lord told me to get him a motorcycle so he could start doing this ministry that he had a desire to do. And so the Lord really connected me and him. His name is Joseph. And the Lord did provide a motorcycle for him. So basically, you know, I went back, when I got back to the U.S., I talked to, the pastor asked me to come and see him. And when I walked in his office, he said, I'd like you to take over the Kenya ministry. And the first words out of my mouth were, I'll do it. Can we double the budget? And he said, yes. And so that's basically how I got involved in Kenya.
You're still involved?
And I'm still involved, yes.
So what are you doing right now in Kenya?
Well,
each time you go?
Yeah, so that has...
You have a trip coming up soon.
I do. I'm taking a medical team to Kenya on September 20th. And our plan is to do 6 days of medical clinics. We expect to treat between 2,500 and 3,000 people. We'll do that in 4 locations, and we are working on the northeast coast of Kenya currently. It's where I believe the Lord's going to have us for the coming decade. And we are targeting Muslim people groups, northeast coast of Kenya. So that's what we're doing currently.
How many times have you been there?
To be honest with you, I've kind of lost count, but I'm going to say probably 20 or more times.
So how many times a year you usually go? At least once?
Yeah, I go once every year. I missed the 2 years during COVID, but I've gone at least once a year since 2007, 2008. And many times, 2 or 3 times a year is the most I've ever done. But now it's basically 2 times, 1 time a year, something like that, depending on what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So are you still overseeing that program?
Yeah, so what happened is I served as the director of missions at this church for 8 years, and in 2015, my wife and I were both living our dream, serving at this church. Had a good job, but this is really my passion, and I just, I couldn't have asked for anything more. And in 2015, my wife and I both kind of felt like the Lord was telling us to just walk away from everything we were doing. And so we were obedient to him telling us to do that, and we ended up taking a job out here in Colorado Springs. And I continued to run the entire missions program for that church for about 5 or 6 months while they sought a replacement. And when they found the replacement, he came out to Colorado Springs and sat down with me for a weekend, and we kind of did a little turnover. And at the end of that, he asked me if I would be willing to continue to lead the Kenya part of the missions program, and that was just one, small part of their program. Mm-hmm. And so that has afforded me the opportunity to continue to work in Kenya. That's really where my heart was, even though we were doing many other things. My heart was in Kenya, and I think they recognized that and wanted me to continue doing that. So I've continued to basically handle the Kenya missions for that church in Florida. And then we've kind of expanded it to Colorado. We've got people from Colorado that have joined us there, and a church in Colorado also that works with us.
So each time that you take this trip, tell us a little bit about how logistics work for a trip like this, because I'm pretty sure it's challenging just to run logistics for a trip of this magnitude. You're not only taking a crew of medical over there, sometimes you help creating wells and installing wells, water wells, for some of these areas. So that's a huge logistic nightmare sometimes, I assume.
Yes, it is. I will say that we did put in a couple of wells in the last 6 months, 6 to 8 months in Kenya. And I got connected with an organization probably around 2014 or 15 called Hydrating Humanity. And they were an organization that was already working in Kenya, but they were working in a completely different part of Kenya than us. But our church had a desire to do water projects somewhere in the world. And we came across this organization called Hydrating Humanity, and we started doing water projects with them. And we actually have become strategic partners. We've done a lot of work with them doing water wells, but we've also invited them into the work that we were doing at the time and the work that we're doing now. And we've kind of worked together with both their founder and their international director to become strategic partners. And so I had a desire back in April of last year. I went to Kenya for the purpose, really, it was a vision trip to identify the next place that we thought the Lord wanted us to work. We had just come off of about 10 years working with the Dorobo tribe, and we had a lot of successes, we felt like, there, and that we had actually completed the vision that the Lord had for us. And so we were looking for our next place. And
within Kenya?
Within Kenya, yes. Okay. And I'm still working with Joseph, the pastor I met the first time I went to Kenya. He and I have worked together all these years. He is he's a pioneer pastor that loves to find unreached people and bring the gospel to them. And so he and I worked together. And so April a year ago, we went over there and kind of surveyed several locations. One of those locations was a Muslim village of about 1,000 people. It's a very primitive village. It's the Orma people group.
When you say primitive, can you explain and elaborate what that means for those who are trying to understand and place themselves into those places?
Sure. By primitive, I just mean that they live in mud huts with grass roofs. Their children don't really go to school. In many cases, the Orma are ranchers, I'll say. They're a nomadic tribe historically, and they keep livestock, and they just kind of roam around.
Move them around. Mm-hmm.
But due to, just the situation in Kenya, the government has kind of forced them into this particular area. And
is there water close by where this tribe is located?
The water source that they were using when I first went to that village about a year ago was the nastiest water you could imagine. There were cows in the water, doing what cows do. Mm-hmm. It was very muddy, grotesque pond, I guess would be a good way to describe it. And so that was their water source when we first went there.
Wow.
And so we went there that day, and really feel like the Lord showed up and basically kind of revealed to us that was the place that he wanted us to invest in the coming years. And so we did decide to put a water well there.
Is that working already?
It is.
Okay.
What
about the maintenance? Because when you do some research about where to put your money in, the stat says that 60% of water wells in Africa fail due to maintenance.
Yes, that is a true statement. That statistic is probably accurate. I've heard a higher statistic than that, but I haven't looked it up myself recently. So, but that sounds correct. I'm just going to toot Hydrating Humanity's horn again. This is one of the things I like about Hydrating Humanity, and one of the reasons that I work with them is because now you have to realize they work in a completely different part of Kenya than where I'm at, and where I'm at is a very difficult place. It's a very unsecure place. There's terrorism activity there routinely. They don't have a drill rig over there, and the drill rig that they have is not suited for that area. But they agreed to help me with this water project. And one of the things that Hydrating Humanity does in their area of operation is every well they put in, they guarantee for life.
Wow.
They have one gentleman on staff that all he does is go around and repair wells.
Wow.
And,
locally on the region?
In the region where they're at.
Wow.
And so they've put in over 1,000 wells in the last 10 years in that area. Their vision was to put a well in every school. Many times kids can't go to school because they have to go get water.
Right.
And so they figured out if we put the well at the school, they can go to school and come home with water.
Yeah.
And so they're getting close to finishing their vision there. They're within 100 wells of having every school completed. And again, they have a guy, full-time staff, all he does is repair wells. So if one of their wells goes down, they send somebody else to fix it.
So which region do you guys actually go into? North, south, east, west?
We are currently working on the northeast coast of Kenya.
Okay.
It's predominantly an Islamic area. We started there on a little island called Lamu Island. It's probably about between 50 and 75 miles south of Somalia.
I see.
And then we go inland from there, where we put this well.
So you're in the coast.
We're on the coast. Yes.
You're not northeast.
Well, we're on the northeast corner of Kenya, but
on the coast.
On the
side.
coast, yes.
Got you. Okay. So even though the water is how close? I mean the sea. It's from where you are.
Lamu Island is actually in the ocean, so we're we stay on Lamu Island when we go there.
Okay.
But we get in boats. We do 2 clinics like this trip in September. We'll actually do 2 clinics on the island, and we'll do 2 clinics on the mainland. So half of the team will get in a boat every day, go over to the mainland, and get in a vehicle and drive to the location where we're doing the clinics. And that's where this Orma village is, on the mainland.
I see. So it's a lot of... So once you guys travel there, it's not like you get to your destination where you guys stay, and you still have some sort of a travel day to get to where the tribes are located.
Yes, it's so it takes about 24 hours to get from the U.S. to Nairobi, and so we'll spend the night in Nairobi on day 2, and then we'll take a flight to Lamu Island.
Got it.
And then once we get to Lamu Island, that's where we'll be. We have a hotel there.
Yeah.
And then each morning, one of the clinics is a 5-minute walk from the hotel.
Okay.
And we go by 3 mosques on that walk.
Wow.
To the church that we're doing the clinic in.
Wow.
This church that has been burned down by the Muslims years ago. And that's why we're there, because we thought, man, if we could go there and do a clinic and invite the Muslims to that church to get free health care, perhaps it would change.
They won't burn it.
And you are right.
They won't burn it because they're getting something out of it.
Yeah. And so it has really changed the atmosphere. We went there first in 2017 with the medical team, and it has made a huge difference in that community with how the Muslims view that church. And so that's one of the exciting things that we've seen happen. So, yeah.
Have your wife ever been there with you?
Yes, my wife has been to Kenya with me many times.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you how many. I'd have to sit down and think about it. But she goes. She's been going on the medical trips with me for 5 or 6 years now, and she went with me before that with some other things we were doing.
So this is definitely something that both of you are sold out to. It's not just your heart, right? But it's also her heart.
Yes.
Accompany you to that location and just taking Jesus into these regions. Where do you see yourself in a few years? Is there a vision? Is there a goal?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our strategic vision is to win Muslims to Jesus Christ. And, like I said, in 2017, we had our initial vision was just to try to change how the Muslims viewed Christians. And so we accomplished that, and we're seeing some fruits from that. But long-term strategic, we're basically trying to repeat what we did with the Dorobo, which is, plant churches. Now the Dorobo, we're not an Islamic people group, so this is going to look quite a bit different.
Right.
But we're using some of the same strategies, and that was water and medical.
And is that working?
Well, I don't know. It's too early to tell, but I'm going to say it is working.
When did that start?
So April of last year, I went to this village for the first time. I think it was probably the 3rd or 4th time that the local pastor had been there who found the village.
Okay.
And when we showed up, he said, "Stay in the car. If I can't find this one guy, we're going to have to leave."
So how safe is this place?
Well, the place where we're at is, if you go to the State Department's website, it's going to tell you not to go there.
Right.
And so it's, I refer to it as...
But you've been there, right? One thing is like, that's a political movement, but going into these places, especially when you travel abroad, it's a different story.
Yes.
You've been there multiple times. How safe is this place?
That's a hard question to answer. I went there for the first time in 2010, and I wouldn't take a team up there until 2017 because of security concerns. And there's been many times in the previous years where I've actually traveled with armed security when I go there.
I was just going to ask you that. Is there some sort of security that you guys travel with?
I'm not doing that currently, but, I refer to this place as Al-Shabaab's backyard.
Okay.
They operate in the area, and, it's many times,
there's a risk.
Yeah, there's a risk.
There is a risk.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know who Al-Shabaab is, It's a terrorist organization that is doing crazy stuff all over the place, especially in Africa.
Yeah, they're out of Somalia.
Yeah.
And so this area is close to Somalia. So they're basically at war with Kenya, for lack of a better way to define it.
Yeah. So at this point, no armed crew is traveling with you. So will you say safe?
I think it's safe. It's
Okay.
it's it's something as a team leader, it weighs heavily on you.
Absolutely.
Every time you start trying to recruit people to go.
Yeah, because
And,
I mean, if you need to recruit people, right? Especially medical teams. How many of the medical teams are in the faith? All of them?
Well, I would say
Probably not.
Prior to this year,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to say it was 99%, probably 100%.
Okay.
I might have taken one
Okay.
person or two
Okay.
in all the previous times.
Mm-hmm.
This year, I think I probably have several people that don't know the Lord.
Okay.
And
That's exciting.
I will say
That's exciting.
that we also, I have about 12 Kenyan doctors that will be working with me on this trip.
Local Kenyan doctors or
uh,
people that Kenyans are coming from the States?
They're all Kenyan residents that live in Kenya.
Okay.
Some of them are local to that area, and they happen to be Muslims.
Wow.
And so we're after Muslims. So I don't
Yes.
mind having a Muslim doctor on
Yeah.
the team.
Yeah.
And in fact, last year, one of our Muslim doctors got to really experience the Lord working in one of the patients' lives. And so we are exposing those doctors to the light of Jesus Christ. So that's exciting.
What is the most rewarding thing that you have seen through the years from all of these trips that you have taken to? What is that thing that keeps you coming back?
Well, I'm not going to lie. There have been a lot of challenges over the years. There's been a lot of, there's been betrayal and all kinds of things that have happened to us in Kenya. But we believe that the Lord has called us there, and we just keep going. And there's been a lot of good things that have happened as well. And so we believe that many people have come to the Lord. We know that the Lord has brought reconciliation to tribes that we have worked with. There's several stories that I could go into there, but time won't allow. And even just the situation with this church, I learned of this in 2011, and I actually took a medical team to China in 2011, working with a Muslim community, and the whole time I was there, I was seeing the impact, and all I could think about was Lamu Island. And I even told the team there in China, I said, we got to go to Lamu Island because there's a need there. And several of the people that were in China with me have been to Kenya with me many, many times. And so I would say the most rewarding thing is that in this particular area is after we did that first clinic at the church, it really changed the hearts of the Muslims toward the Christians. They quit harassing the church, which they were doing constantly, and now they look very favorably on the church. And there's a lot of really cool things happening with the Muslims on that island that have opened their hearts to that church. And I'm not going to say that I can't definitively say that some of them have converted, but I believe that is very near, if it hasn't already happened, and that we are seeing some movement of the Lord among these people. And we're kind of shifting our focus from that particular church to this Orma village. And I mean, that you asked earlier, what's the kind of the long term, the end game? I want to see this Orma village come to Christ. I mean, that's really why we're going. And we're just trusting the Lord with that. And we've already seen some good things happen that have kind of confirmed that that's where we're supposed to be. So that's what's rewarding, is kind of knowing that you're where you're supposed to be.
How's the relationship with the elders of the tribe? Because I know that's a big deal in those regions, to have that trust in a way, right, and to have that connection. Yeah, I think trust is the right word, because if they don't trust you at a level, they wouldn't even let you be there, even though they know that you're doing something good for them.
Well, that first time there in April, we met with one of the elders of the village, and as we were about to leave, there was a Muslim woman standing there nearby. She was inside a hut, and as we were about to leave, she walks out of the hut, and she actually hobbles out of the hut. And so I could tell immediately there was something seriously wrong with her leg. And so I just asked, hey, can I pray for this young lady? And I didn't know it at the time before I asked, but it turned out to be that elder's daughter.
Oh.
And so they said I could pray for her. And that was pretty significant to me, because we've had Muslim patients at our clinics that were terminally ill, that were like, you're going to be dead in 6 weeks. Right. And they would not let us pray for them.
Yeah.
And so, when I got to that village that morning, it was like, stay in the car. If I can't find this guy, we got to leave. Fast forward an hour later, we're getting ready to leave. I see this lady, and I ask if I can pray for her. They say I can. And so I just tell them, I said, I followed Jesus, and Jesus healed people many times when he was on the earth. And we still believe that he heals people today. And I'd just like to pray for your daughter that the Lord will heal her. I don't know what'll happen, but I want to pray for her. And they said I could. So that was a big sign to me. One of the things that kind of confirmed, that we were supposed to be there. And so I prayed for her, and we left. And, didn't really know what happened. But that was in April of 2022. I decided after that situation to shift where we took the medical team in 2022. So back in October of last year, I took the medical team to that village. And while I was there, this lady sought me out in the middle of some chaos.
This is the lady that you prayed?
The lady I had prayed for.
Okay.
Big smile on her face, was very happy to see me. She was not walking with a limp whatsoever. I don't know what was wrong with her, don't know what the Lord did, but I believe the Lord healed her in his way, and she was happy to see me and wanted me to meet her child. And so we did that. And so that was in October of 22. In November of that year, we actually got a driller up there and drilled a hole in the ground for the well. And we got that pump installed in January of this year. And I went back in February of this year and went to that village. And I was with my friends from Hydrating Humanity. Their founder and their international director both were with me on that trip to see that well. And when we got there, middle of the day, there were still 80 buckets lined up to get water.
Wow.
And so they're using the well extensively. And I'll just say that the gospel was very clearly preached that day in this village.
Amen.
The imam was not happy about it.
Of course he's not.
But after all that was done, they brought a goat out and presented us with a goat as a gift.
Okay, that's a good gesture.
And the elders said that we were welcome to come to that village anytime we wanted to.
Yeah.
So we believe that the Lord has opened the door for us there.
Yeah.
And we're just trying to follow his lead. And I'm going to tell you straight up, Tony Gooch does not know how to win Muslims to the Lord. But we're just trying to be God's hands and feet, demonstrate his love to them. I believe very strongly that the Lord told me a few years back that he was going to win the people in this area by a demonstration of his love. And so we prepare the team
right.
when we go to demonstrate the love of Christ to these people. And it is amazing the encounters that occur in 5 minutes that impact these people in ways that is very evident in several cases. It's very evident that the Lord is moving in their hearts. So we would just invite everybody to pray with us that this particular village, that Jesus reveals himself through the Holy Spirit, and that they have an opportunity to know him. So that's what we want.
So if you're looking for somebody to connect with, do we have to have anything lined up? Do we need to know anything to even be part of this ministry? What kind of person are you looking for? If there's a need there, I believe that God always positions himself in a unique way, and sometimes we push ourselves and we even say, well, I'm not ready, or I'm not in the capacity to do certain things, or I don't know that well enough to be efficient for God. And I believe totally the contrary. I think that God is only looking for people that are available for him to use them. That's just my take. I could be wrong. Is God looking for people that are just available for him to do his will? What does it take to go into a place like this, with a ministry like this? What is the person that you need?
Well,
because I know the need is great, right? Medical teams are always good, right?
Yep.
That's a good badge to have. But what if you don't have any medical training?
Well,
and you want to do something about it? Something.
You can,
or test the waters, right?
Yeah. You can still participate. In fact, I'm taking 18 people on this trip. It's the largest team I've ever taken, and that presents some logistical challenges.
They're all medical?
Nope. No. I would say over half of them are not medical. And,
so what are they doing?
Well, we can staff. We're running 2 clinics simultaneously, so we're going to break into 2 teams. So we'll have 9 people from the U.S. on each team, and we'll have 6 Kenyan doctors on each team, and we do have some medical people from the U.S. as well.
Yeah.
But we set up a pharmacy. And we run the pharmacy. So
you need bodies, though.
I can use 2 people with no medical experience to do that.
Yeah.
If you can read and understand,
right.
you can help us with that. We also always need somebody for crowd control. I usually like to have a man for that. I always like to have a man for that. And then we do what we call triage, and if you can learn how to take blood pressure, or we take many people that know how to take someone's blood pressure, but they're really not a medically trained person.
Yeah.
And to me, that's one of the most important positions that we staff, right? We'll have 3 people that every single patient that comes to that clinic is going to sit with one of those 3 people. They're going to get their blood pressure taken, their name written down, what their main complaint is. And that's where we have 5 to 7 minutes with every single patient to clearly demonstrate the love of Christ with them. And I'm telling you, we get reports, where they're going out into the community and telling people how they were treated with such love, and then droves of people are coming. So, I'm taking a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old on this trip.
Wow.
Taking a couple of 22-year-old college students, recent college grads on this trip. And so we're pretty excited, and we've seen the Lord change people's lives.
Yeah, for sure.
After going on a trip like this.
Sure.
So I would say if you have a desire to do this, and there's an opportunity to do it, I would ask, why wouldn't you do it?
For sure.
And I've just seen the Lord provide people with opportunities, and if they say yes, then he provides a way. And so there are many, many opportunities in this world to serve others through missions. We're just one little bitty piece of that.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would encourage people If you've never done it, I believe everybody ought to do it once. My pastor in Florida used to say, everybody ought to, hit the 4 areas that you read about in Acts, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth.
Absolutely.
And so you ought to try to hit all 4 of those locations, right, in your lifetime. This is the uttermost part of the earth opportunity right here.
Yeah, and I will even say Christians, right? People in the faith, sometimes they also look for those places. Okay, I want to go far. I want to go to, I don't know, Latin America. I want to go to Africa. I want to go to China. But they don't do anything local. They don't even care about the backyard. And I think we need to start somewhere. And people sometimes they get hanged by the fact that they don't have the means or they can't find an opportunity to travel overseas to share the love of God, right? And they're just hanging themselves in it. There's so much that we, as people in the faith, can do in our own backyard. We need to start somewhere. And I think we need to be available and give ourselves to the Lord fully. And everybody has a mission to do on earth, until we get called by our Maker. So everybody needs to find what is it that God wants to do with you. And through that, he will open the doors and he will close the doors that need to be closed. But I believe that we need to be available for God to use us in a mighty way.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you, Tony. If anybody would like to get in contact with you, if you're listening to this episode and this story actually nudged your heart, you want to know more about this ministry in Kenya, Tony, can they get in contact with you? Is there any place that they can learn more and understand what you're doing?
Yeah, the best thing to do would either send me a text or shoot me an email, and we can start a communication that way. And
we can put your email in the show notes?
Sure.
Okay. We don't want to put your phone number because that could be crazy.
Okay.
But we'll put your email on the show notes and you should be able to connect with Tony. Tony, thank you again. We appreciate you. We're encouraged to know what God is doing through you and how he's using you. And just the fact that you're available and you have the means in this season in your life to devote time from your life and do this with your family, I think it's a beautiful thing that we all need to learn from. So I appreciate you, sir. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hey, friends. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And if this content is helpful to you, would you consider rating this episode and subscribe to the podcast? It will mean the world to me. For more information, you can follow me on Twitter by going to twitter.com/Rafael Sifontes. Until next time, God bless you.